Coming in at number 20 is Dragon Quest VIII Journey of the Cursed Keen. This game came out in 2005, originally on the PlayStation 2, and then eventually got ports over to the 3DS and also like on Android and iOS. This game was my first introduction to a Dragon Quest game. I knew enough about him that like Akira Toriyama did the artwork for them, rest in peace, sir. And then also that there was some creators, which I didn't know the names of at the time, and I apologize, I still don't, but that there was just a team that was consistently making these Dragon Quest games, and that they were hugely popular in Japan. That's about and that, they were just your traditional turn-based RPGs. That's about as much as I knew about them right before I got into this game here. And but this game, so it came out on the PlayStation 2, and the PlayStation 2 was just such a behemoth of a system that even a more otherwise niche sort of game here in the West of Dragon Quest still had some hype behind it. And so it was I remember that the reviews started coming out of this, and people were really talking really good about it. And so I was really curious to see. I was like, okay, well, I've always heard about Dragon Quest games, and maybe I should check them out to see what they're all about. And yeah, I mean, sure enough, once I got to playing this game, it immediately it felt like a comfort food game, basically, almost. And even though I had never even was aware of what the series was all about, and so. Let's see, what am I doing here? Okay. But part of the reason that I ended up getting out to also, and I'm sure for a lot of people, which is probably smart on Square Enix's part, is that they bundled a demo of Final Fantasy XII with Dragon Quest VIII. So Final Fantasy XII ended up coming out in 2006, but then this came out in late 2005. And so, I mean, I think a lot of people ended up getting into this game because of that. And I mean, ultimately, why this game plays is pretty high on my list is I have a very soft spot for old school traditional RPGs. And I mean, even to this day, I can still find a lot of love in them with, when I'm just playing them, grinding it out and all. And, you've already seen some of the ones that I've had on my list here for old school RPGs. And as the generation started going on, and eventually technology grew, and they would experiment. A lot of companies were experimenting with different game mechanics and all, which was cool in a lot of ways. But let's take Final Fantasy, for example. Once they started going to Final Fantasy X, they were going in a different direction as far as like trying to get away from like what was the traditional turn-based RPG. And there was a lot of successes in that, not gonna lie. I mean, there was games that I did enjoy that they tried new game mechanics and all that, that I actually really enjoyed. But I kind of missed that, that where I didn't like too much that we were also trying to get away from this, standard JRPGs of the time. You have an overworld map, you fight some enemies, it's turn-based, and your traditional gaining experience points and gaining gold or whatever, and I missed that, and because it seemed like we were trying to steer away from that. So when I played this game, I was so thrilled that, because again, I'm learning about Dragon Quest along with this game, and that Dragon Quest had always really kind of stuck to its guns of just being the more traditional RPG series out there. And I just, and for that, I just ended up falling in love with it right off the bat. Just here from the start, the colors, the character designs, again, from the late, great Akira Toriyama, and the acting, I really started liking a lot as well, too. And everything just felt very homely and charming, and something that just lured me in so much because it felt like something like I feel like I've always needed this series in my life, and I never just got around to playing it until this one came out. And so yeah, immediately I fell in love with it, because once you kind of get going in the game, you realize that this really is just an old school RPG. You're just going around the level, going around the overworld map, grinding, because there's a lot of grinding in this game, and just solving some mystery in a town and then moving forward to the next place and so forth. And it's old school like that, and I love it. But it still has certain modern sensibilities. Like, the graphics are really nice. It's some of the best that you'll see on the PlayStation 2. The acting is just really well done with a lot of English accent voice actors. These two cracked me up. And then the music as well too. I mean, I'd never heard of this guy's score, but immediately I was like, okay, I can see why this has always been compared to, well, maybe not necessarily compared, but it's always been a rival to Final Fantasy. Like, it just started making sense right off the bat as I was playing this game. I'm like, oh, okay, I get it. Having never played any of the other Dragon Quest games before. And of course, this is my first introduction to the blue slimes. And what's interesting is that because the game is very old school, it still has a pretty decent following, though. And it kind of shows that there is still a market out there for just your traditional turn-based RPGs out there. We don't need anything too complex. I mean, this game has its skill tree, so to speak. It has a few things that you can do with the battles too, that are a little unique, but for the most part, it's nothing really that you haven't seen before. And it's just, it was just such a joy to traverse through the overworld in this game. And because it was sort of like almost like an open world, but in a traditional kind of RPG style. And so just getting to explore this colorful overworld map and all, it really just brought me back to my childhood, but at the same time, with, it looked nice, and it was like, but I am playing a modern game, though, at least at the time. And so just a combination of all that there, and I just felt like this game was just made specifically for me, of a lot of things that I used to love, and also kind of telling me like, this genre is not dead yet. There's still plenty of good things that can be done in that, even if you're just sticking to the basics. And I really appreciated this game for that. So Yuji Horii, yeah. So he's basically like the Hironobu Sakaguchi for what Final Fantasy was, at least in the earlier days. Akira Toriyama, he's been with all the all the Dragon Quest games up until 11. And of course, his legendary work on Dragon Ball. And Koichi Sugiyama, the music composer. So as far as I know, he's been the music composer for all the Dragon Quest games as well too, that had been released. The ones in the mainline series. Akihiro, I'm not sure how much he was involved in the project, but basically with those three names that I first mentioned, again, they've been behind a lot of these Dragon Quest games, or with all of them really, and they just have a certain style. And I think because they all stuck together is why there's a certain consistent quality in these games. Because as I've visited some of the Dragon Quest games now, and I've only been a very small fraction of them, like this one, for example, and I beat part 1, part 2. I'm working my way through part 3 with the new HD 2D remake that came out. Let's see, 5, 6, 7, and yeah, those are the ones that I've beaten. But I've gotten a little ways into pretty much all of them, except for 6. I haven't really played 6 too much. But yeah, just very, like I said, it's a comfort food RPG. It's really what it is. Whenever I play this game, or even a lot of the other Dragon Quest games, like Dragon Quest V is the one that I really want to get into, because I heard that one's really good, and what I've played of it up until now, it seems like that's one that I'm really gonna like. But it's just like, it's almost just like coming home, when I play these games. It is a bit grindy, but everything about it, just the simple battles, the very creative enemy designs, the banter between your characters, wanting to know what happens next. It's just really cool, because this is a very long game. I mean, even without trying to get a lot of the extra stuff in this game. I mean, the first time I played it, I think it took me like a little over 70 hours. And, I mean, so I was here for a while. I mean, this game just kept going and going and going, but, I loved every second of it. And it's a very, I mean, it's given the art style and everything, you would think that it's just a very lighthearted adventure. And it is. I mean, there's a lot of, like I said, the funny banter between these two. These two crack me up. What's his name? Keentrode and Yangus. They're just funny as heck. There's like an ongoing, kind of like an ongoing joke in the game where Keentrode just sort of pops up out of nowhere, and Yangus will like do this animation like he's surprised, and he's like, "Oh, blimey!" It just cracks me up every time. But yeah, it just oozes like a lot of creativity in this game. Crikey. And the other thing I think that what really hooked me, because I was already really liking this game, but the mystery though, I'm a big fan of like a good villain, I think most people are, right? And all that you have a good antagonist, right, to the overall plot. But with this one here, I really ended up enjoying what they did with this, with the villain here. Because when you're in this first town, so it's like, okay, so there's like a mystery here that you're looking for this guy, but then you end up finding out that, well, his house was burned down. And then you start learning of a certain name. And initially what you end up finding out the name Dolmegas as being like a villain. And without spoiling too much, I'll just say that what they did with like the bad guys in this game, I'll say, it's pretty cool. It's and it's very evil sometimes too. Like I was surprised with certain scenes. I was like, oh dang, they got away with that with I'm pretty sure there's like a teen rating, right? But I mean, it can get kind of dark sometimes. So yeah. So see, he's kind of making mention of him there. But yeah, I mean, it can get kind of dark sometimes too. And so I just like that combination of really colorful with really kind of dark too also, because again, where ultimately I think about like where you start out and then where you end up as the last boss fight and all that. It's pretty epic, and just a journey that you go through, right, to get there. And you only have a small cast of characters. It's only 4 characters. And so you got your main character, which you can name, whatever you wish. And in traditional Dragon Quest style, it's he's a silent protagonist. And there's Yangus, which you already saw. And so he's sort of the tank. And then there's Jessica, who she's sort of kind of like a little fast, but also good with magic. And then there's Angelo, who he's a bit of a charmer, but he's good with like healing spells and such. And small cast of characters, but that's all you need, right? They got a lot of personality, and because it's a small cast of characters, you just get to appreciate them more in their story as you find out what their backstory is all, and as you go through one scenario to another and how they interact with the world and all that. It's pretty cool. But yeah, again, even to this day, we were trying to get away from like, again, more traditional RPG designs. And so for this here, I just like that, you can just kind of explore the town. There's a lot of little, as you get to some of the bigger towns, you get to see some of the nooks and crannies of it, and find like hidden treasures and hidden rooms and all. And that was a big fun part of the fun in this game, is just exploring these towns, because they could get pretty cool. But yeah, Dragon Quest 8. The differences as far as like this one and the 3DS one, they're both really good versions, so you're not going to go wrong with whichever one you get. It's just kind of depending on what you're willing to sacrifice, I guess. And so with the PlayStation 2 version, if you're able to get your hands on it, or if you're emulating it, is you're going to get better graphics. It's not a huge, much better, but they are better, and an actual orchestrated soundtrack. And this score is beautiful, so it's nice to listen to it in fully orchestrated version. But the downside, though, is that the 3DS version has a lot of quality of life improvements. So you can speed up the battles, which is good because, again, this game tends to get kind of grindy. And also, there's a few new, there's 2 extra characters that you can have in your party, which, it's something extra, right? And also, that's cool. And let's see what else. There's also because it's a dual screen, you can have the map of the world and all, I believe, at the bottom screen, and other little also you can kind of see where you're in your skill tree and all, what you're ultimately grinding towards instead of just not going in blind. So I thought that was kind of cool too. And there's a few other things here and there, but the graphics do take a bit of a hit, and then the music isn't as good because it's a little bit more meaty version. But either way, like I said, whichever one you choose, they're both of them are really beautiful games, and so you can't go wrong with either one. But yeah, Dragon Quest VIII, if you can get your hands on it somehow, definitely check it out. It's a long game, so you're going to be here for a while. But I do feel that if you've never tried a Dragon Quest game before, this one I feel will really lure you into the series. Or if you have been playing Dragon Quest games but have missed out on this one, this one is known as one of the better ones for a reason. So, I think you'll definitely have a fun time with it. Coming in at number 19, Street Fighter Alpha 3, as the man said. So I don't have a whole lot of fighting games on my list here. The only other one that I had was Virtua Fighter 5. And so you might be a bit surprised as to this fighting game coming out of nowhere and, placing pretty high. So, yeah, at my number 19 spot. And when it comes down to it, though, I just love a really fun video game, and I love a game that knows what it wants to do, and it does it really well, and it demands that if you're going to really enjoy it, that it demands you to learn its systems and its gameplay and all that. And for me, Street Fighter, starting with Street Fighter 2, I just, back in the day when that one came out, I really got into the Sega Genesis versions, because those, again, I was a Sega kid, so the Genesis is what I had. So with Street Fighter 2 Championship Edition, and then eventually the Super Street Fighter 2, I fell in love with those games, and I just would play them over and over and over and over. And I got, somewhat decent at it, that at least within my circle of friends and all, right? And I would be pretty competitive. And then every now and then I would go to the arcade, and I could do all right, whenever I would play someone at the arcade. And so Street Fighter 2, it laid down an amazing foundation where it was one of those games, again, and all, where you really felt that if you lost, it was because you just weren't skilled enough or fast enough and all that, right? Not because the system was broken, because everything just feels very kind of like they're different kind of fighting games, but the kind of like Virtua Fighter is that the controls are very precise. The moves, as long as you have a good controller or an arcade stick, that if you've messed something up, it's because it's on you. And I love that. It's a very technical fighting game that is it demands you, for you to learn its intricacies and all that, right? So you can get good. And when you pull something off, you really feel it's because you've mastered it, right? Or you became good with it. And so the timing of everything and all that, it just feels right. It's kind of hard to explain, but really very few little games get it so perfect than say, like, for example, this game here, because Street Fighter 2 started showing me that. But then, then there was all the different variations of Street Fighter 2. And then we had the Street Fighter Alpha and Street Fighter Alpha 2. Street Fighter Alpha 2, I really got into. I loved that game, and I played that game originally on the Sega Saturn and was really into it. And then there was Street Fighter 3, which for me personally at the time, it was a bit of a disappointment, and I think to a lot of people actually too. It wasn't until the third version that I think people started appreciating that game more. But then this game came out, and so this game came out in the arcades, and then eventually on all the, it came out on on home release, and so it originally came out on the PlayStation, and it would have been back in, let's see, 1999, I believe, and because that's where I first played this game was the PlayStation version, and I just immediately just loved because I was already loving the art style from the Alpha games, but then like the UI of it and all the menus and all that, it's very flashy and all. The announcer's really cool too also. He just has a very energetic voice, and the music to this game too, which I've never really associated Street Fighter games with like really cool music. Like I like the music, and in Alpha 2 I thought it was pretty good. But this one is just a very energetic score that I really like. And so when you're in the heat of a battle and you're getting this music thumping, it's quite the adrenaline rush. Just like when you fight M. Bison at the end, and then the song that plays, and then especially the background and all. And if you're a fan of the Street Fighter 2 anime that came out from back in the day, it's very reminiscent of that. So I was just so floored when I was playing this and just having an absolute blast with it. And it just was begging me for me to get good at this game, and I did okay. Like I said, at least within amongst the people that I knew and all, I was always very competitive on this, and the few times that I played it at the arcade, I was okay. When I go online now, though, and all, God, there's so many good players out there. But I love seeing them play, though, just because I like watching like some of the, what is it, the Evo or the Vivo, the fighting tournaments and all. Because I like seeing other players, right, and all that are really skilled at this. It's just kind of fun to watch. And but yeah, and what I liked about this one is that it gives you customization options to make it like the best Street Fighter out there, because there was a few different modes that were happening within the Street Fighter games where you can be more combo centric, more power centric, or more technique centric, I guess you can say. And it gave you the choice on which one you want to pick. And I felt that was just really cool because you were customizing your character, and I thought that was excellent. You never really saw that in a fighting game. And the fighting, the way you pull off the moves and everything just was done to perfection in this game, in my opinion. And the art style that was using the CPS2 arcade board, I love the style, the animation to it and all that, the character designs, what they used for numerous games during the stretch, because it started with Night Warriors and then Darkstalkers, and then the Capcom fight, or the Marvel fighting games, the Versus series, and then the Street Fighter Alpha series also. And it's just a really cool anime look. The animation is really smooth, not quite like what they did with Street Fighter 3, but it's still really smooth and all. And the backgrounds are really nice looking, and yeah, it was just a blast just watching the characters animate. Everything just feels right. Everything controls perfect. And this is why I have this game so high up, because I just gush over like how, in my opinion, how perfect everything feels as far as like the controls and all. And I like, the Street Fighter setting, right? You're these world warriors duking it out, and all. My main character of choice is probably going to be Ryu. And I do like using Guile. And every now and then I'll use Sagat or Sakura, but those are some of my main characters that I like using. I used Rose for a while too also. But Yeah, it's just such a fun game to play, and it's sort of my comfort food game that I go to when I just want to like mindlessly play something, but I know I'm somewhat decent at it, And I just have a fun time every time I play this game. It is just so cool, and I never get tired of looking at the game just because again I love the 2D art style, and I wonder if that website, if well, yeah, Capcom.com is still should be the same one, but yeah, just oh, I love this game. And this version that I'm playing here is on the Capcom Fighting Collection 2 that came out. And I think there's like a update coming in where I think it's going to add a lot of like the characters and all that was in the PSP version, because that one was just loaded to the gill with just a bunch of content and all. And that's the other cool thing that I really liked about this one. And I mainly only really played it on the PlayStation version, but it has like a, I forgot what it's called, but it's considered like a world tour mode. And so you get like certain, you know, objectives that you need to do, right, to win certain fights and all as you keep advancing forward. And then it's kind of like an RPG where you can power up your character, if I remember right. And so anyways, that was all really cool and all. And yeah, I mean, I should really try getting into that and all, because I remember I had a blast with that, playing it back in the day. And as far as the version to get, well, right now, like I said, the one on this one that just came out, it seems to be like a really cool version. And it I don't know, because there was a Street Fighter, what was it, the 35th anniversary edition that came out fairly recently, which has this version too also. But surprisingly, what's considered one of the best ones, well, maybe not too surprisingly, but the Sega Saturn version. And that one, unfortunately, only came out in Japan, but it had the, where you can use the I think the 4 megabit cartridge or megabyte cartridge, where you can, you know, it basically made it like almost arcade perfect. And from what I've heard, it's one of the more preferred versions to play, because for people that are really hardcore into this game, I mean, they're going to notice like little changes here and there, right, and all that. And so there's, from what I understand, there's certain versions that are preferred for like more competitive play. But for just casuals, I mean, and all, you know, this version seems to play pretty good. Hadouken. Yeah, I don't know if I like this Pro controller or the. I like the 8-bit Do Pro controller, but I don't know, the D-pad. It's not. I don't know. It's not my favorite to play like these fighting games. But yeah, Street Fighter Alpha 3. For some reason you haven't picked it up or played it, and you like 2D fighting games or really fighting games in general, check it out. Coming in at number 18 is Xenogears. I think there's a quote in this game that says something like, when you listen to music, it kind of reminds you of a certain time or something like that. I want to say I think there is a quote in this game, something to that effect. Right now, when I'm listening to this song, it brings back a lot of memories of mine. I was already 18 years old, so they're not necessarily childhood memories, but, you know, memories when I was younger. And at the time when I played this game, I was, you know, again, I was a young adult. I mean, I just barely turned 18 and just going through a lot of, you know, changes. You're a growing person. You're learning about life. You're finding out sometimes the ugly realities of life and all that. But I played this game again when I was 18 years old, and there was just something about the music to this game that struck a chord with me in a way that, flash forward many years later, brings back just a lot of memories of back then, of just like how I was struggling with a lot of things back then, and yet was always trying to push through it, always trying to move forward. So almost like, and this soundtrack really helped me out get through a lot of this stuff. It just put me in a state of mind where it gave me a sense of hope. And it became so ingrained in my head that even to this day, I can't like get it out of there and all. And it is just always something that I always go back to. Like, for example, this song right here, whenever I need a little bit of a pick-me-up. All that to say is, I'm just talking about the soundtrack. The game itself is in many ways on that level too. This is the first little scenario, part that you get to play in this game. So this is Xenogears, came out in 1998. Again, another one of the great games that came out in this year. And it was when Squaresoft was just on a roll, coming out with a crazy amount of quality RPGs during this stretch. As far as JRPG goes, I really feel like the mid 90s to the early 2000s or so was just the golden era of JRPGs, specifically from Squaresoft. Because this game here, from what I understand of the development of it, it was... So I think it's a husband and wife. I could be wrong on some of my facts here or some of my details here, but I think it was a husband and wife, and they were programmers or something like that. And so they had in mind a really complex story that it had like a lot of philosophy to it and a lot of religious elements to it and all. And my understanding is that originally it was pitched for an idea for Final Fantasy VII. Ultimately, that got scrapped, but their ideas still kind of lingered on, which eventually became this game here. And I don't know if they were like students of psychology, or I'm not exactly sure, again, what their background is. I've seen some documentaries on it, and also I feel like I should have some of this memorized, but I don't, so apologies. But they wanted to create something and all that really wanted to... that you went on this journey where you're asking questions about things, like questions about life, about your own morality, and just the world around us, your faith here and all that. And if you have no idea what this game is, or if you're not even into video games and all that, this might sound like it's a little deep, and you're looking at this or you're like, okay, this looks like a very simplistic, little game. Like, where are you getting all this from? Well, that's the magic of it. It's, when I first played this game, I mean, I was playing it and I immediately liked it, right? Like, I liked the characters, the music, like I said, was already really resonating with me. I thought the graphics at the time went over really cool and all. But it wasn't until I really, you really start getting into this game and you see just how deep it goes with so much... the lore to it, the world that they created, the questions that it asks of you, and because it touches on a lot of themes of like self-identity, philosophy. There's a lot of like, what's that guy's name? Niche, I believe. A lot of his teachings and philosophy is all in this game. A lot of religious overtones and all, and you combine it all in this kind of cool anime aesthetic with excellent music and all, and the story, it's just mind-bogglingly deep. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but it's, after when you're going through the game, I remember when I was playing, again, I was 18 years old when I played this game, and I'm just like, this is like a little bit beyond my scope of understanding a lot of these things, but I loved wanting to learn things about it. Like I love what it was trying to tell me. Like, I'm like, I feel like this game is really trying to get me to ask questions, not necessarily teach you something maybe, but just get you to ask certain questions about yourself, about what God is, how technology intervenes with human life and all, and it asks you to question almost your morality, your moral compass, your faith, and all, and like what do you believe in, what do you stand for, and then also asks you to teach your own self-courage on how you would react in given scenarios. Right now, obviously this is all fiction and all, but a lot of the things that Faye goes through it really is, it makes you reflect on yourself a lot, I believe, as he's going through his own self journey of discovery. And yeah, there's a lot to talk about this game, and I don't want to get into spoilers again. I know it's an old game, but again, I'm trying to keep to, avoid as many spoilers as I can on this. My plan is to eventually maybe do, I don't know, maybe like podcasts where I'm discussing stories more on video games and all. But so I'd want to try to keep it vague, but just it's the kind of, it tells this story, and it sort of leaves like these little breadcrumbs of like mysteries, that you're constantly trying to unravel. And like you see something like, what does that mean, and all, and and so then it just kind of keeps hooking you right on the overall mystery, and it's just it is so entertaining and so thought-provoking to go through this journey that you really are mentally engaged and stimulated while you're playing this. And I love that kind of stuff. There's movies that I really enjoy, right, and all, where like Blade Runner, Inception, Interstellar, movies that make you think a bit, right, that make you kind of look at the broader picture where everything is not completely spelled out for you, or even if it is, right, it goes down this deep rabbit hole that you never expected to go as you're questioning life and all. And I love that kind of stuff. And that's what this game is. I mean, there was so much about this game and all that I absolutely loved. And then again, and there's a lot of other elements that I haven't touched. Like the graphics are really cool. I like this 2D sprite with the 3D background style that was kind of popular during the 5th generation. I just like the look of it. The music already is just amazing, and the battle system, which it is an RPG, you're going to be fighting, is actually really clever, and it's one of my more favorite turn-based RPG battle systems, where it almost kind of plays out like a brawler, where you can do some combos and all, but in a turn-based kind of way, and you can learn a bunch of different combination of moves and all, and then some power moves, and each character has their unique attacks and all, and the varied characters that you end up meeting in this game are really cool, as far as their design, how they fit into the story, how they play mechanic wise, and just all of that. Just you really get to like these characters that you're playing with, and all of that. I mean, I just remember playing this game, and this is because this game came out again after we had some heavy hitters, right, in RPGs, and again, 98 was just a crazy good year. But something about this game was just really, 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 making me feel something. And so much so that as I was playing it, I was telling myself, I was like, I think I'm playing the best game I've ever played. And that was mainly the case, and it was going on to be that. I was like, I think this is my favorite game I've ever played. It's just outstanding what they created with this game. And then the whole, you get to ride mechs in this and all, kind of, I'm a big fan of Voltron and to some extent Robotech from back in the day. So I was just loving this game. It was like way too much. The stuff that happens in the story was blowing my mind. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, what I was hearing and all. It was just amazing. This game really could be my favorite game of all time. There's just one issue with it, one main issue with it, and it's a big one though, which is that this game just ended up, everything that I'm saying, right? Because we were going through the story and you're like, there is so much here. How is this going to pay off? How is this going to conclude? Because it's like this is a highly ambitious story that they're trying to tell here. And that's the problem, because see, ultimately, my understanding is that the main creators of this game, again, I know that this couple that I mentioned earlier had a hand in it. Like, I don't know if they were like the main creators or not, but they had a pretty big hand in it. And ultimately, it just seemed like they either didn't have enough funding or enough time to fully flesh out this game the way that they probably wanted to. So if you've played this game already and you beat it, you know what I'm talking about. But if you don't, I'll just say this. So for anybody that's new and wanting to get into this game, if I happen to be selling you on it, just know this. Oh, this song too. Just a gorgeous song. This little scene too is just really cute. But the game comes in 2 discs. The first disc, some of the best RPG goodness you'll ever play. It's absolutely beautiful. I can not say enough good things about this game. The second disc, unfortunately, what it is, it was rushed, and so much of that disc, it just gives you like an image on the screen, like your character, and then it just has a bunch of dialogue. And so what it's doing is that it's just giving you a bunch of exposition on what's going on in the story, and then eventually you end up in a dungeon or you end up in a boss fight, and then after that it goes to more exposition, right, which is just a bunch of text on the screen, and then you go to the next dungeon or boss fight or whatever until you finally get to the last boss and beat the game and all that. Now, what I remember of the overall ending and all, because I've only been this game once, because it's a long game, it's a very long game. But I do remember being fairly satisfied with the overall conclusion. It's just that the second disc just, it doesn't really, it's not like the first disc. There's very minimal gameplay. It's just a bunch of exposition on the screen and all that. It's just telling you a story. So from what I understand, it was kind of like we can either scrap the game, but they were already fully, pretty far into it, or we just do the second disc like this, and at least it's something. And it's so unfortunate because there's an absolute masterpiece in this game that I can't do it justice for what this game is. And if there was ever a game that I just wish that they would come back to and do a remake of it all, it is this one here. It deserves it so much because there is just so much greatness here. And it's just for me, one of the biggest gaming tragedies is that this game just never got to see its full potential. It's that good. And if that were to ever happen, like if I had millions of dollars and say, okay, you can hire any creator you want and all that to create a game, finish a game, or whatever, this is the one I would be. I was like, here's a bucket, truckload of money. Please just finish this, right? Make it what it was supposed to be. But I don't see that happening, which is unfortunate. And, we got a lot of Xeno games afterwards, they have like certain little Easter eggs, I think, of this game, but to my understanding, they're not really tied together because there's a Xenosaga series, which is really cool, the trilogy. That one there, I've only actually played the first one, which I thought was excellent, but I haven't played part 2 and 3. But part 1 is excellent. And then there's a really popular Xenoblade Chronicles games that are, that have been out on the Nintendo systems, like on the Switch and such. And I haven't really played through those, but the little bit that I have, they really seem really good. So I'm kind of excited to go through those games. So I would almost think because of the popularity of those Xenoblade Chronicle games, because there's some of the same developers or creators, it's my understanding. It's like I wish that maybe that would prompt Monolith Software, I believe is the name of the company, to go back and finish this game. But that's wishful thinking. I know we'll never get it. But even as it stands, in this kind of unfinished state that this game is in, it still landed on my number 18 spot of all time. And I really wanted to give it, I would almost give it number 1. I almost would. Maybe, I don't know. Then again, when I get to number 1, you're going to hear me gush about that. But it would be a very strong contender to be one of my number 1 favorite games of all time. It's just that I can't overlook just how unfortunately unfinished that second disc is. And because of that, I realistically, I can't place it any higher. But even then, just one of the most amazing things I've ever played in a video game is here with Xenogears. I just can't say enough good things about it. And I feel like I'll stop there because I just don't feel I can do it justice. I'll just let this little scene play out. Coming in at number 17 is Super Mario World. Super Mario World? You know about this game. Pretty much everyone seems to know about it, right? But in case you don't, it was a launch title for the Super Nintendo back in 1991. And for being a launch title and being this good was legendary. Mario was already really popular at this time. Mario 3 had just come out just a few years earlier, and that was like a mega hit for Nintendo. And so then that this game came out, and it came out even in a lot of ways better than that, was just truly outstanding. Now, granted, it went onto a more powerful platform, but still, though, for coming out of the gate with a game like this, right off the bat, that the Super Nintendo became legendary. Because, for me, the Super Nintendo was one of the best systems of all time. And this game was a big part of that reason there. So what makes this game good? What is it, I guess for younger people, why is this game still so good? Why do people always talk about this game? And it's always like on the, seems to be always up there with like the best video games of all time. Well, it's the fun factor. It's really what it comes down to it. It's, that's why Nintendo games have been around for so long, and why they're so popular is because at the end of the day, they know how to make a good, fun video game. And with Mario being kind of like their flagship character in games, they're a perfect representation of that. The obstacles that you face in the stage, the challenge, which is challenging but not too super challenging, the overall just funness of the game with a combination of the controls, the level design, the aesthetics to the game, just all the color, all the color on screen and all, and the very something about just the Mario games and all that they just have a certain look to them and all that, just have a mass appeal to them. And why the character has endured for years and years is that it's just a silly little game, right? And all about an Italian plumber, but it's just so fun. And that's the main key ingredient there, is the fun factor of it. It's just so fun to go through these stages, and you have a lot of hidden secrets. And also that's what makes this one, again, my favorite Mario 2D game, is because of all the secrets that you can find. And also there's so much that you can go back to in this game, and whether you find them or not, just going through the stages is just so much fun, and you just never get tired of it. And it just always brings a smile to your face. It's just, and look at this. It's just, how can you look at this and just be mad? It's just genius game design. And, when you're playing it, you're just having fun. You're not really thinking about it and all, but then it's not when you go back and you play some other platformers, and no knock on them, because again, there's plenty of other cool 2D platforming games, for example. But when you go back to them and all, for some reason, you keep coming back to Mario, and it's just the genius of just the overall construct of the game, with the Mario games, right? And all, and this one just got it so right. Like I had Super Mario Wonder earlier on my list, and I love that game. I think it's a great game and all that. But the reason I still choose this one, though, for my preferred Mario game is, again, I just come back to the cleverness of the level designs. And that's really what it comes down to. They don't overstay their welcome. There's a lot of clever challenges in them. And it looks great, sounds great. It's just fun to play. And really, that's what it takes. And, with some perfect controls and enough secrets in there, right, to kind of keep you guessing, like, where you can enter a certain spot or not. And then the inclusion of Yoshi also, he just, it's just makes it even more fun to control. Oops. Little secrets like that. The challenge of trying to get all these dinosaur coins. It's platforming at its best. And unless you just don't like platforming games, this is as good as it got, in my opinion. And again, there's plenty of awesome platforming games out there, but this is it for me. And again, it's I was always a Sega kid growing up, but every time I would play a Mario game, and the little bit that I got to play this one as a kid, I was like, that game is really addicting. There's just something about it that I really like. Yeah. And so then, because basically I didn't play this game as a kid. It wasn't until I was an adult, right, when I started playing it more. And actually, I beat it, last year. I beat this game last year finally for the first time. And after I beat it, I was like, just one of the funnest games I've ever played. I mean, it's just such a blast to play through. And the other thing too, also, that I think a lot of Mario games, the good ones anyways, perfect, like on these 2D ones, is just a variety in their stage too also. Every stage has a different challenge. It all feels a little different. And so you always look forward to the next challenge. Oh, oops. And I always wondered as a kid too also, because again, I would play the Mario games and I did like him, but I was like, why is he always so popular? Because I was like, he's kind of lame, he's not cool like Sonic or Sega characters. But once I got to be an adult, I was like, I get it now. I get why this game was the series was so beloved by many people. And Mario's done a lot of, the Mario games have done a lot of cool stuff in the 3D realm. I had Super Mario Odyssey earlier in my list, but when it comes down to it, my heart is with the 2D ones, and this is the one here. Is it my favorite Super Nintendo game? Not quite, but it's definitely up there. I mean, I have it pretty high on my list here of favorite games of all time. Not my number one, like I know it is for a lot of people, but I can see why it would be your number one, and I couldn't really argue with that. If your main thing, right, of why you play games is for the fun factor of it, yeah, definitely. This is definitely one of the best ones. But if for some reason you haven't played this, just go play it. Just go play it. Coming in at number 16 is Final Fantasy X. Final Fantasy X originally came out on the PlayStation 2 in late 2001. If I recall correctly, I think the game was slated to come out at the start of 2002 or so, But then all of a sudden, I saw it at a store, and it was in December, so of 2001, and I was like, "Oh wow, this game is already out." And so I remember rushing to snag a copy of it. So it came out in that very crowded year, and especially last stretch of 2001, where, like I've mentioned before, there was just amazing game after amazing game coming out, one right after the other, and then we topped it off with this one here, and Final Fantasy X is one of the most beautifulest games I've ever played. And I say that in terms of the graphics are nice. They were amongst the best at the time when it came out. And the story is just very heartfelt and emotional and just an overall beautiful story. And the music as well too really elevates it a lot too. If you're kind of listening to the song that plays in this little segment here, that evokes just a lot of different emotions and all out of you. And so this is the first little intro to the game where, even before you press start. And so right off the bat, you don't even know what's going on and all that, but you seem like they, seem a little solemn, and all, but there seems to be like they've been through a journey and all. And by the end of this game, you're just emotionally distraught with just the overall plot of what happens. And so I will say that Final Fantasy games a lot of times are not just having really great stories and all. This one, though, it may not be completely like my overall favorite plot, but the way it tells its story, where it's very cohesive and that one thing leads to the next as a consequences of what came before it, and all the turning points and all the twists and turns that this story takes and all really leaves you with so much emotion and so much happiness and sadness and anger and all that all at once and all, and it just finds a way to drive all these emotions out of you while being a very fun RPG to play. Also, the turn-based is actually one of my favorite of all time in this game. I love the battle system to this. And it's just from beginning to end, there's really no like segment of this game that I didn't really that I dislike, because a lot of games, even some of my best games of all time, there's certain moments in the game where I'm like, I gotta go through this part, and I can't really think of one in this game outside of like doing some of the side stuff, because some of the side missions will drive you absolutely insane if you try to beat it. But just like the overall game, right, and all the main part of the game, it is all the way through a very fulfilling adventure, and you come away very fulfilled emotionally and all that, and you're just thankful to everyone that that was behind making this game, that they created something like this. And it's, when I played this game, I had already been coming off of the high off of games like Metal Gear Solid 2, Devil May Cry, Grand Theft Auto 3, Jak and Daxter, Silent Hill 2, and just a bunch of amazing games. And again, to top off that year with something like this, which ended up being my favorite game of this year, and at number 17 or not, number 16 of my all-time favorite games, it was something else. And actually, when I played Metal Gear Solid 2, that was my favorite game at one point. And then I played this like shortly afterwards, and then this for a period of time was my favorite game of all time. I really loved this game a lot. It's just really great. And I know I say that a lot, like that was my favorite game of all time. This was my favorite game of all time. And it's just because, again, when I played them at that time, and all, they really resonated a lot with me. As years went on and all, then I kind of became a geek, even more so, where I'm, cataloging all my games that I've played and all, and making a top 100 list and all that, and all, it's just the way my brain works. I just like to keep the stuff organized. But once I started breaking it down as far as like, okay, what are really my number one games? I mean, I will say that any game that is in my top, so from like where I'm at right now, from my number 20 to number 11 with what I'm doing here, a lot of these games can kind of be intermixed with each other, really, right? But it's just like, kind of, you'll eventually have to place them in a slot, right? And I certainly don't regret where I put this one. Sometimes I wish I would have placed it a little bit higher, but I can say that about a lot of the other games within this top 20 to 11 games here list here also. But really, I mean, we're really getting into these games here all that were really powerful for me. and definitely this game here. But ultimately, some of the things that I guess kind of hold it back a little bit is it's a very linear game, which I'm fine with in this game, enough that I placed it pretty high on my all-time favorite list. But it is something that I feel... I mean, if they would have made this game a little bit more open world, you would have probably lost the very tight script that this game has. But because of that, though, I feel like it lacks a certain... I don't know if I want to say the word depth, because it has a lot of like side content and all that, and the battle system, it can be very complex and all. Like, if you really, especially if you really start trying to do like the monster training thing and all that. But there's just something about it though and all that I feel like you don't I mean, it does a really good job of letting you experience this world called Spira, but because you don't really get to explore it in a vast sense, right? Like where you're traversing there, where you can go anywhere and all that. For me, it kind of loses a bit of points for me for that. But I still love it though, and I wouldn't change it though, like I said, because I'm glad that we got this game, because it's one of the best stories in video games for me. And so I'm ultimately, at the end of the day, I'm glad that it's, it is what it is, right? And the other thing too also is I love the cast of characters in this game. They're all great. And I like, I know a lot of people complain about Tidus because he's, a bit whiny, and all. But I didn't mind his character too much, just because the way the story is played out, you are the character, right? And all, because the way the story plays out and all is where you're learning a lot of things about this world, and so you're learning alongside with the main character. So it's cool for that, and I like being a part of that journey, right? I seeing it through his eyes, I appreciated that. But there's just, because he is the main character though, the main actor that voices him, James Arnold Taylor, who he's excellent. He does stuff like, he's Ratchet and Clank, who he does an excellent job as Ratchet and Clank. And a lot of the different stuff that I've seen him in, like in animations and voiceovers for certain movies and all that. He's an amazing actor. It's just that he does a good job as Tidus, and I've gotten so used to him and all that. But I can't help but feel that I wish they would have went a different direction with his voice. And again, I don't think it's a fault of the voice actor. It's just perhaps the direction either he was given, or maybe it wasn't the role for him. And I hate saying that because he's become very iconic to Tidus. But, it's just something about it though and all that, right? That it just kind of loses me a little bit. But like I said, I played this game, I don't know how many times. It's so many times and all that he's just been so ingrained in my mind now that I almost can't hear anybody else other than him. But I still feel like maybe they could have gone in a different direction. As his character arc and all that, I think it's fine. It's just the direction of his voice and all that. I feel it just can be, like I said, I feel like maybe they could have gone a different way. And the other thing too also is Yuna. She's a great character, and she's one of my favorite Final Fantasy X heroines. But kind of the same thing I had with Tidus is the direction of the voice actress, that the way she voices her, and sometimes it comes across a little too, like, I don't know, like a little too unsure, a little too solemn, like, and I feel like the style of the story, the way it's written, it's very different than like Final Fantasy 16, where that was very Shakespearean and almost seems like it was meant for like a English audience, right? Where this game, it's coming from like a lot of anime sort of storytelling, and so because of that, there's a lot of like pauses in their voice, like and sometimes it can sound a little weird. If you're not used to like anime, and the way they dub like the voiceovers for it in English, so it has a lot of that. So if you're not used to that, you might even get very annoyed by like the voice acting in this game. And her character has a lot of that, which can be a little kind of annoying. Because otherwise, like I said, the writing, how she's written and all that is really great, and I love her overall story arc in this game. It's just, again, the delivery of the voice that comes across a little weak, in my opinion. And the fact that they're the two main characters is what kind of bugs me. But it's not enough that it ruins the game or anything like that. It's just, again, I kind of wish they would have fixed it. And I say that because I pretty much like all the other voice actors across the board. Waka, he's just, John DiMaggio, the way he plays him is just, Waka's amazing. I love Waka. And then there's Lulu, who she's great, though, she gives off that big sister, kind of sisterly vibe, and sort of like the mature one in the party. And Riku, who she's just a silly girl, but just a lot of fun. And Kimahri is, a lot of people talk smack about Kimahri, but I like Kimahri as far as his role in the story and all. And then, of course, Auron. Auron for me is one of his story in this game, his character arc and all that. I love this character so much. He is so well written. He's kind of the mature mentor, one of the party, I guess you can say. And his just overall involvement in the plot and how he's, interacts with the party and all that. Just one of my favorite characters of all time. His design is amazing because it kind of really, it's not only because it makes him look cool, but also it plays into the plot. And I love when they can do that. That the visual design is there for a reason, not just to look cool or stylish or whatever. And yeah, he's just definitely one of my favorite characters of all time. I can't say enough good things about the way Auron is written in this story. And his theme song too also is just, it's so great. So the whole party is great. And what I love about this game in the turn-based battle system, so it's a little different from Final Fantasy, where up until this point, it was kind of more where, well, I should say from starting from 4 to 9, where they had the ATB gauge system. This one, it's a little different, where you have like a grid on the side and it shows you whose attack is coming up next, so you can strategize that way. And so you can take your time a little bit, right, to try to plan ahead your attacks and all. And it sounds like, it'd be easy doing that, right? Because I was like, oh, well, you got to see who fights next. There's actually a lot of strategy to it because the enemy has a lot of tricks up their sleeves. And so it makes it for a really fun and engaging battle system. And then what I like about it too also is the way they introduce like the overdrives, like your power attack. Each one of them has like a unique move. And the sphere grid, I think, is a fun way to level up your character. It's you get like a really cool visual sort of guide as far as powering them up and all, which I thought was really clever. And the other thing that I really like about the battle system too is that it really wants you to use all your characters. And I thought that was great because that way, a lot of times in RPGs, you have like that, those party members, you're like, nah, you never use them. This one, you're almost forced to use them just because when you're fighting certain enemies, you know that a certain character is going to be able to wipe them out really quick. And so, and the nice thing about it is that you can switch your characters in and out, right, with just a press of a button, which is really cool. And so, you really feel engaged to each character because, again, not only are you hooked on them with the story, but also in the gameplay, right? And when they can combine those two things in a video game is where you have something really special. And yeah, I mean, I love this cast of characters. There was so much fun to go on this journey on. And yeah, Final Fantasy X, just definitely one of the best RPGs out there, and one of the best PlayStation 2 games out there on a system that was quite legendary. Coming in at number 15 is The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. A very legendary game that came out in 2017 on the Nintendo Switch and the Nintendo Wii U also. So the game was originally developed for the Nintendo Wii U, but the system wasn't a success for Nintendo, and so likely part of the reason why they wanted to move it over to the Switch also and be a launch title for it. And so what we ended up getting was probably one of the best launch games of all time. It was most definitely a big reason why the Nintendo Switch was so successful, to have something like this come out at the start. And it was a perfect storm where you had this new take on the Zelda series in a very open world that changed up the formula a lot on open world games. And the fact that you can take this amazing experience on the go. It was something that I know for me personally, I was just amazed by that this could exist, right? That you have something in the palm of your hands that is so expansive, so full of creativity and gameplay, and in a huge world that you can get just completely lost in, and you can take it on the go, was just truly stunning and was definitely a highlight in video game history. And it was this part right here where I think all of us sort of realize like what kind of an experience we're about to get into. And with that commences one of the greatest adventures of all time in video games. I mean, really, this game, it's one of those games that is up there, right? And all that you're going to usually see with the top video games of all time list. And, it's another one for Nintendo too also, which, Nintendo does a lot of things that is not, that I personally don't agree with. And a lot of people don't think, either, especially more recently. But you just can't help but deny that they do make some quality video games. And some of their video games have always been just some of the best of all time. Like, for example, this one, right? And all in Super Mario World that I played a little earlier, from two completely different generations. And they're just a lot of times on a lot of people's, favorite game of all time list. They just are very fun to play, and you get so absorbed in them that you are just in awe of the genius of them, right? Just how clever they are with sometimes very simplistic things, but how they're able to pull it off and all is just part of that Nintendo magic. And a lot of that is from, their all-star creator, Shigeru Miyamoto. He is, obviously his team is also a huge part of the success of these games, right? And all, but that he just happens to have his hand in a lot of these, major Nintendo franchises really speaks to why he is who he is and why Nintendo is what it is. All thanks to that man right there. And, Zelda, The Legend of Zelda, believe it or not, was actually on a bit of a slump when, before this game came out. And they really needed to change up the formula, and they did, And because they did, I personally, with this game, people loved it from the start, right? And all it seems like, and all. I mean, like I said, the game just was crazy good across the board, and right off the bat was being considered like one of the best games of all time. I didn't get the Nintendo Switch until about 2019, and I just wasn't really too interested in it. I kind of went through a period where I lost some interest in Nintendo, so like around 2010 or so, I just really wasn't feeling the Wii at that point. And then the Wii U came out, and it wasn't all of it. I just like, I just didn't care too much for it. And so then the Nintendo Switch came out, and again, I just wasn't really feeling it. But then I kept seeing, right, that it was really successful and all. And so ultimately, I ended up buying a Nintendo Switch because at the time, my daughter was born, and so she was still fairly young. And so I was finding that there was a lot of late nights, with her, trying to get her to go to sleep. And, you just have kids, and sometimes you're just up a lot later than what you wish. And so I was, struggling a bit to trying to get my video game fix in. So I started saying, I was like, well, what about the Nintendo Switch? I keep hearing that it's really cool and all that, and I like that it was fairly powerful and all. And I mean, I knew that it wasn't like the most powerful system, obviously, but that you can play a, pretty top-notch quality AAA games on a, handheld form factor. I thought that started intriguing me. So I bought it, and I bought this game. And right off the bat, I didn't know what to think of this game. I was like, I don't know, like, because again, some of my favorite games have been the more traditional Zelda games. You have an overworld, you go through some dungeons, you find an item that helps you, complete the dungeon and so forth. And so when I played this, it was very open world. You pretty much do. It's almost like hands free, right? Where you're like, do what you want. And I didn't know if I liked that at first. Maybe I'm just getting a bit older and I just need to be guided a little bit and all. So I wasn't quite getting it when I first played this game. I didn't like that your weapons break and all, and I wasn't quite sure like what to do. And the game seemed a little too challenging. So I played it and I liked it, but I didn't love it. And so I eventually kind of put the game off a bit, and I was like, I don't know about this game. But something happened though a few years afterwards. I kind of forgot what exactly happened, but something lured me back to this game. Because again, I just kept seeing that everyone was talking about like this is one of the greatest games of all time and all. So finally I decided to give it a serious shot. And I started playing it, and then eventually everything just kind of clicked. And I think I just kept doing the shrines, getting stronger, getting my stamina up, starting to explore the world more instead of feeling like I need to be on a guided path. And before you knew it, I was just all over the place in Hyrule, just having an absolute blast and really getting to enjoy the kind of like the DNA of this game. What is it asking of me to do? And so the thing was is to sort of use your critical thinking skills. Like right here, it's like, oh, okay, there's two rocks. Okay, now this one's kind of obvious, right? But just, random little things like that in this game that it just, made you think a bit. And I really ended up appreciating it for that. And then as I got stronger and all and learned how to get better weapons and all that, it just really started hooking me. And once I got going on this game, I just kept playing it until I eventually beat it. And I was really loving it. I thought it was great. I was just loving just going through this world, and almost got to the point that it's like, okay, I need to maybe just, try to beat this game now. And so I did. Finally, I felt I was strong enough to do that. And I was rewarded with probably one of the coolest last sections of a game. And what I thought was so cool about it was not only what happens, but also because it happened because it was a reward for me going through a lot of the missions in this game and trying to, complete a lot of it, I'll say. Because technically, if I wanted to, maybe not right now, I think I still have to get the paraglider, I'm not sure. But for a super skilled player, you can go pretty much straight to Ganon and try to take him on. That'd be super hard to do. And again, you must be crazy skilled to do that. But supposedly people have done it. But because if you take your time to go through the game and all, what it really wants you to do, and you complete certain, I'll just say quests, and basically play it the way it kind of wants you to in a way, you are rewarded with one of the coolest scenes I've seen in a video game. I just thought it was so cool and felt like it was a big reward for all my efforts, right, to try to go through this game. And I didn't 100% it or anything, but just do some stuff in the game and all that, right, and all that you don't necessarily have to do. And I just thought it was like the coolest thing ever. And yeah, I was just I was so excited when that scene happened, because I didn't know exactly what was going to happen, and just to see it play out and all, it just gives me goosebumps every time I think about it. But yeah, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, it's one of those games that just kind of reminds me that sometimes, not always, and all, there's times when you just have to know when to quit, even if it's a game that's really popular and all that, and you're just not quite getting it. So for example, like the Souls games, that's a series right there where I've tried and tried and tried, and I love the idea of them, and especially because I'm like a Berserk fan and I just want to get into those games, but I have a hard time. I haven't given up on them yet, but I'm just having a really hard time with them. I was maybe not to that extreme, but I was kind of like that with this game. It was just something about it that wasn't registering. But I kept at it, and I'm so glad I did, because as you can see, it's one of my favorite games of all time. And I'm excited too also because I got the Switch too, and then seeing the really beautiful 4K 60 frames per second version of this game, it really is a sight to behold. And I kind of want to go through it again, in that version there, even though I put tons of hours in this original one. But yeah, the sequel to this, Tears of the Kingdom, it's cool too also. It's been kind of hooking me, but I think it is a little bit too similar to this one, where, you put so much time in this game and then you're kind of sort of traversing the same areas in the second one. It loses a bit of its overall appeal, I guess. Not a bad game by any means. It's just that there's a lot of similarities and all that. I don't know if it justified it being its own game, basically, I guess is what I'm getting at. But for what it is, this game right here, great game. It loses like the dungeons, because I really like a lot of the older Zelda games, but you do have a lot of shrines that you can do, which are, some of them are pretty clever, and the way you use your I guess your special items is pretty ingenious as well too. Some of the way you solve the puzzles with some of them and all, I thought was really creative. So you do gain that though, right? And also you're not maybe necessarily using them in a dungeon, so to speak, but you are using them in various different ways just throughout the world. So it's almost like the whole Hyrule in this game, it's its own big dungeon, I guess, if that makes any sense. But yeah, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, it's one of those games, about it. It's one of the most highly revered games of all time, and it's for a reason. So if you are one of those few people that were maybe like me, where you didn't quite get into it, excuse me, didn't quite understand it, just keep at it. If you have to look up a strategy guide or something like that, because I promise you will see why this adventure is known to be one of the best of all time. It's really something else. Coming in at number 14 is Phantasy Star 2. Phantasy Star 2 was originally released on the Sega Genesis, and I think it was in 1989 on its launch year. If not, maybe 1990, early 1990, I believe. And it was released fairly quickly after the first one. I think it was only like a year apart or so, give or take. And it was one of the first, the first major RPG for the Sega Genesis. And was it 6 megs? I don't quite recall. But it came out during a time where, again, RPGs were, they're not the most popular thing and all, especially on a Sega system. And Sega apparently still had enough faith in the Phantasy Star name to be able to bring it out, because the first one was one of the flagship games of the original Master System. And so they probably wanted some kind of an adventure game, right, and all on their new system on the Sega Genesis. And this game here, it's high on my list, admittedly, I will say, because of nostalgia. But damn, is that nostalgia hard with this one. I was so looking forward to this game when I would see it in screenshots and all, and I had already played part 1. And so again, this is where I have to sort of emphasize right now that I'm a Sega kid, because it seems like most people, like I've said before, went down the Nintendo route. You know, you were into Zelda, Mario, Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, those games. As a Sega kid, we didn't have that. Unless you were playing at a friend's house, but that's not what we grew up with. So we had things like this, like Phantasy Star, for example, and Phantasy Star 2. So when this game came out, or when it was, I remember seeing it in magazines and all, and I just thought it looked like the coolest thing ever. And I love the new anime aesthetics. It looks so futuristic, which I was always a fan of, like more futuristic kind of things. And it was just something that, don't want to go quite there. But it just, and again, because so many things were coming out that were medieval and all, and so I just thought it was cool that this series here was more along the futuristic side. It was just something that I thought was very original at the time and all, and just something different. So I'm just kind of picking up on on a save file that I have here kind of late in the game. But yeah, Phantasy Star 2, why is this game up here, right? This old RPG, what is the deal with it? Well, first and foremost, like I said right along, I just absolutely love the aesthetics of it. I just, I love this futuristic setting and all. And a lot of it too also ended up being just the overall plot of the game. So I'm a young kid. The game came out in 1989. I didn't play it until probably a year later or so. So I would have been around roughly about 10 years old when I played this. A young kid, my imagination is flowing, and all. And so when I got my hands on this game and I started playing it, and it was pretty hard for me at the time, but it really helped me. I mean, I already knew how to read and all, but it really helped me appreciate reading more. That's one thing that RPGs really taught me a lot when I was a kid. It's just a love of reading. And so, it really helped me with that. And then the overall plot that happens in this game was just so imaginative to me. So it's an old school RPG, so you're not going to get a whole lot of characterization, if any at all, really. I mean, you don't really get a whole lot of backstory to these characters and all. So it's really the plot that's kind of driving this one here. But it is a very good plot, though. Basically, you're an agent for the government, and there's this mother brain that's out of control. And so you're on a mission to try to stop it, as it seems to be, dysregulating like the weather and creating monsters and all, and spreading like false information and all kinds of stuff like that. So you're out on a mission to try to stop this mother brain. And what mother brain ends up being, the journey to get there and all, and that you're traversing through these 2 planets. And there's some pretty major moments in this game too, and all that happened. And I just thought it was so clever. And again, I don't want to ruin, some of the twists in this game. And it was one of the early games and all that, very early in my video game career, that I was like, okay, there can be cool stories in video games. Like, this is pretty cool. And I liked it so much that I remember I used to write like a story based off of this game. It was the same story in the video game, but I would write it out and just as a hobby, right? I just love this game so much that I used to do that. And I think I did it for like a school project at one point. And also I would just because I just wanted to read the story when I wasn't playing this game, because I never actually owned this game as a kid. What it was, so back in the day, a cousin of mine, so he also had the Sega Master System and the Sega Genesis. Well, eventually a buddy of his that he got to know had the Sega Genesis, and he was able to get some pretty cool games. I think he was a little bit older than us. And so he set it up so that if I went over to his house, I could borrow games from him. And so this guy lived, well, he would have been around a teenager. So again, I was like around 10 or so. So he would have been around a teenager. And he lived on the other side of town where I lived at. And I didn't grow up in a very big town, but it was still, a little ways away, right? Especially for a 10-year-old. And so what I would do once I got the address on where he lived, and I was a very shy kid also, right? I was a big introvert. But once I found out that he had Phantasy Star 2, I was like, oh, damn, I got to play this. And so I very nervously, because again, I'm just a very shy kid. I don't know this, the guy. I went over to rode my bike all the way across town and, to see if I can borrow this game. And sure enough, he let me. And when I was riding my bike back home, I just felt like I had like this treasure in my hand, I was so excited. And so, went home, plugged it in, started playing it, and just went on an adventure of a lifetime. At least, in my kid brain back then. But yeah, I just had so much fun playing this game. And nowadays, I know that the background to these fights, battle scenes and all that, it was probably due to possibly graphical limitations and also time restraints and all, maybe even budget. But at the time, I just thought it looked very futuristic. Like, are we on a grid? Are we in the Matrix? And I didn't even know what the Matrix was, I mean, and obviously that movie hadn't even come out then, but my brain was kind of thinking along the lines of that, because that's the cool thing about when you're a kid, and even before the internet and all that, is that your mind just sort of filled in the blanks. Even if you were completely wrong, it was still cool to fantasize about that kind of stuff. But I love the color of the color usage of the game and all. Sega games were really usually colorful like this. And sure enough, because some of the creators of this game, I believe, had a hand in Sonic as well, too. So Sega had a few different teams and all that, right? And all. And I think some of them were related to like Sonic stuff and all. But one little funny note about that friend, though, also was that's also how I played Sonic the Hedgehog for the first time. That was another game that he had that he let me borrow at one point once that game came out. And, the game is very rough nowadays. It's very difficult. And some of the dungeons in this game are just, they're kind of insane. Okay, the layout of them. You are going to have a hell of a time trying to beat it if you don't use like a walkthrough. I'll just say that now. I mean, so much so that when this game was released here in the United States, it came with a strategy guide, like a little mini book of strategy guide. And I did use that quite a bit to beat this game. Again, I was 10 years old, 10 or 11 years old, 11 at most. And so I would have never figured that out right at that time. Even nowadays, I mean, I would have to have a lot of time to try to figure out some of these dungeons. So, like I said, I will admit that a lot of the reason I have this game is because of nostalgia, but I just remember how happy I was playing this game a lot, and I still go back to it, and I still have a fun time. That's my thing too. It can't be just nostalgia. I want to be able to go back to this game, and I'll still have fun, even if nostalgia is powering a lot of that. But if I can still have a lot of fun with it and all, then yes, I will consider it to be amongst this list, and this is definitely a good example of that. But it is a bit slower pace, and also, like I said in the Phantasy Star 4 video, so see how she kind of shoots or throws the boomerangs one right after the other, so it's a bit more slower pace and all than say like Phantasy Star 4. But I just like this one more than Phantasy Star 4 because again, it just, the story is a bit sparse, right? And all, it's not constantly giving you like dialogue and banter amongst the characters or consistent story beats and all. But when the story beats happen and where the plot goes, I feel it's just so much better done than Phantasy Star 4. But yeah, it's a very original game. One of my favorite endings of all time too. I love it. I thought it was so creative back then, on what happens at the end. If you're open enough to try an old school RPG that is really grindy, very difficult, check this game out. You can find it on a lot of different Sega Genesis collections, but one way to play it that might ease the stress of it, right? And all as far as for playing a really grindy game is if you happen to have the Sega Mini, I think this collection 2, the second one that came out, it has a version of this game where you can play it where you're walking faster. Your characters, they walk faster on the map. and it doubles, I think, like your experience points or and the money you get. So the money in this Phantasy Star World is called mesetas, and you basically get more than normal. So that helps, to speed things up a little bit. And if you're going through emulation route, there is a way you can get that version in emulation as well. So you just have to do a little bit of digging. But yeah, Phantasy Star 2, one of the most memorable games that I've ever played. The experience that I had with it playing as a kid, the story beats that happen in this game, I still feel are really excellent. There is a remake that was done of this game. It was only came out in Japan on the Sega Aegis lineup, and I want to go through that version. I haven't really played it too much, but it looks all right. It's not really maybe what I would have wanted in a remake of this game, but I feel like if they ever did do a remake, they could really flesh out a lot of things more on this one and make it, really something special. But as it stands, it's still one of my favorite games of all time, and I just have so much love for this game here.
Disposal facility on Shadow Moses Island in Alaska's Fox Archipelago was attacked and captured by Next Generation Special Forces, being led by members of Foxhound. They're demanding that the government turn over the remains of Big Boss, and they say that if their demands are not met within 24 hours, they'll launch a nuclear weapon. You'll have two mission objectives. First, you're to rescue DARPA Chief Donald Anderson and the President of Armstead, Kenneth Baker. Both are being held as hostages. Secondly, you're to investigate whether or not the terrorists have the ability to make a nuclear strike. Stop them if they do. What's the insertion method? We'll approach the disposal facility by sub. Launch a one-man SDV. After the SDV gets as close as it can, dispose of it. From there on, you'll have to swim. High-Tech Special Forces Unit Foxhound. Your former unit, and one that I was a commander of. So they're still around. There are 6 members of Foxhound involved in this terrorist activity. Psycho Mattis, with his powerful psychic abilities. Sniper Wolf, a beautiful and deadly sharpshooter. Decoy Octopus, master of disguise. Vulcan Raven, giant and shaman. And Revolver Ocelot, specialist in interrogation and a formidable gunfighter. And finally, in charge of them, Foxhound squad leader, Liquid Snake. Liquid Snake? The man with the same code name as you. The nuclear weapons disposal facility covers the whole island. I'll instruct you by codec after you reach your target. Anyone going with me? As usual, this is a one-man infiltration mission. Weapons and equipment OSP? Yes. This is a top-secret black op. Don't expect any official support.
Coming in at number 13 is Metal Gear Solid. Metal Gear Solid was originally released on the PlayStation 1 in 1998. So another one of those games that came out in this amazing year. And Metal Gear Solid was one of those games that revolutionized so much in the industry. Basically, it was one of the, I mean, it was a game that really wanted to push things more to be more cinematic and more mature, and not just for the sake of like blood and gore and all, because we were already having that, but just something that was more where like, you know, adults can get into. I feel very blessed that I was born during this time, in the time that I was, you know, back in 1980, because I was born around the time that video games were kind of getting going. And so I feel like the games that were being developed along the way were being catered to someone like me. That when I was a kid, there was a lot of cool like platformers and those kind of games. And then as I got older, there was like more mature games, right, that were being made kind of targeting towards my demographic. And so this game came out in 1998 when I was 18 years old. And so it was right at the right time where I could play this and say like, this is cool. This is very mature. This is something that I would see like in a movie, but even in a lot of ways better. And this song that plays here, David Hayter. The feelings that this game evokes is just something else. Now, this game is more simplistic than some of the other Metal Gear games that I've already shown. So the reason I have this one higher than part 2, 3, 4, and 5, which were all on the list, is yes, it has less game mechanics, not as good graphics, but the atmosphere of this game, the story that plays out, the still very fun, if you know, simplified mechanics and all, well, at least, but at the time they were very creative and very unique, very innovative, and it was just really something else getting to go on this mission here with Snake, because it was unlike anything that I had ever played. A lot of us, nothing like anybody had ever played at the time. Well, maybe not anything, because so I had Snatcher on this list, which is also a Hideo Kojima game, along with this one as well too. And so the story, so I was already kind of used to his storytelling style. That when I played this, I was like, oh, so this is from the dude that did Snatcher. So I was like, okay, so I already was kind of used to, I guess, to his style and all. But this was done in a kind of a little bit more mature setting. And the stakes of this game and all, where I don't know why, but I've always had a weird sort of fascination, I guess you can say, almost with like nuclear war and all. Not that I ever wanted it to happen, God no. It's just, like I said, maybe I just watched the movie The Terminator way too many times as a kid. And so just the looming threat of it, I guess, is always something that fascinated me as far as like a high stakes plot device, I would say. And so that's kind of what this game is, right? And all that you're ultimately trying to stop, without spoiling anything, a nuclear launch, right? And how the story plays out and all the mysteries and intrigues in this game and all were just very fascinating to me, and done in this very kind of almost anime sort of storytelling way. And in a way that also, again, Hideo Kojima just has a way of doing, where he's able to combine the fantastical silliness sometimes with very high drama too. And the voice performances in this game are just really amazing. And 1998, we had been having more acting in video games, but it still wasn't the best. And so here's another game from Konami and Hideo Kojima's team, where again the voice acting and all that is really well done. And so you can just tell that it was something that they really wanted to get right, because it makes a big impact as far as how it's delivering the story and just the overall experience. David Hayter, again, he's just amazing as Snake. And after all these games that I've shown you and all, outside of Metal Gear Solid 5, where he wasn't the voice for that one, you can see why people just really loved him in this role. He was Snake, as much as Mario has his mushrooms, Sonic has his coins, Snake has his raspy voice. he just really embodied the character so well that, you know, it's just hard to hear anybody else other than him. And I love how they do this little opening here, all where it's very cinematic, you know, where it gives you the, you know, the opening credits there. And so a lot of the game is sneaking around, right? You know, it's a stealth game, and so at the time there wasn't a whole lot of stealth game options out there. So this is something really also that this, you know, that the series really revolutionized was, you know, stealth gaming, where it's not about guns blazing and all. You really want to try to sneak around and all, right, to avoid the enemy. So while that can sound kind of boring, they found ways to do it where it feels very tense, very high stakes and all. And it's a combination of like this, you know, for the time, smart AI, the intensity of the sound effects, especially like when you get discovered and you get the little exclamation mark, you know, like alarming sound that's become very iconic now. All of that, you know, where it feels very, you know, this heightened tension to the game and all that shows that you don't necessarily like, you know, fast-paced gunplay and all that to give you the, you know, feeling of, you know, that you're in a being very action-packed without a lot of spectacle, I guess is one way to put it. And I gotta say, something about the grittiness of these graphics and all, and, you know, that they're, you know, from an older generation, that it does give it a certain feel to the sort of tone of the game and all. And I think that's part of the reason why I really like it. And I guess what I'm trying to say is that I like the sort of loneliness feeling of it, that you're out in the Alaska somewhere in the middle of the night in a snowy tundra, you know, on this stealth mission. I just love the concept of that. I think it's really cool. I tend to like stories or games and all that where it takes place mainly in one setting over one night. You know, I think it's because it really amps up the high stakes of the plot, right? I feel, anyways. Okay, I'm just gonna kind of go through here, so you're not. Again, I don't want to bore you too much with the story in this, and also because so that way you can experience the story on your own. Because again, that's one of the great things about this game is the story to it. And it's a fairly short game. It's not too long. But what I like about that, though, is that it makes it for a very concise type package of a game where everything has a purpose. Nothing feels boring. There's one little segment around somewhere in the middle of the game that it is a little bit, I don't know, a little like, okay, you know, like we got to do this now, but it's not that bad though, really. And it kind of plays into the plot as well too. So, you know, that was kind of cool. But yeah, so this game here, right, and also kind of like with the other Metal Gear Solid games, you have your team that you can call. And so just hearing the conversations between them, or you and or them and Snake, it's pretty entertaining or very informative. The voice cast was done really well, and what I liked about this one is that they kept some of the accent of some of the characters here. So Mei Ling has an Asian accent, Naomi has like an English accent, and Natasha, she has a bit of like what sounds like a Russian accent, and I like that. I feel like it gave them a lot of personality, and I say that because it was changed in some of the later games. So just trying to like hide from this and all, right? It kind of amps up the tension a bit that sometimes just trying to go guns blazing can't do. And for the PlayStation, I mean, the graphics were pretty good, but you know, they've definitely aged, but it's still, you know, like I said, I can still find myself going back in time, right? And all, when I felt like this was just truly revolutionary and all. And so I can still appreciate it for that, but I can understand. I mean, you know, the graphics do look a bit blocky and wobbly, I guess, and the music and all is done really well in this game too. Also, and the footsteps and all, you know, and all, it kind of clues you in on like that there's an enemy coming, so you can use that to your advantage to try to sneak around the area. And for the time, I mean, the enemy is pretty smart. You know, they'll see your footprints. They're going to start, you know, tracking them. I mean, it might seem fairly simplistic by today's standards, but back then, I mean, this was, you know, something else. Whose footprints are these? Come on, move camera. And so part of the fun, like, you know, when you're, is just trying to know how to get to the next area. It's like, okay, well, is there a door I can open? Is there somewhere I can sneak into and all the while you're trying to avoid being detected? Because you can go guns blazing and all once you get a gun in this and all, but it's just, it is more difficult. And I like that about it, that because it tries to, you know, really emphasize the stealth gameplay of it. And you would think that that's a little bit more believable, right, in real life, as, you know, if you were to get caught and spotted, you know, you're probably not going to be able to Rambo your way through it. So, okay. And the cool thing is that in some areas, there's more than one way to complete an area. But yeah, Metal Gear Solid, just such an amazing game. And again, I know it doesn't play as well as the other ones, but just something about the feelings that this one evokes and all, and with just the story to it and all, the excellent gameplay and amazing characters, and my favorite version of some of these characters too also. It just takes place over one night, but this moment that, or this story that you'll play out here with Snake, it really just kind of stays in your mind and all on what happens. And again, you know, I said before that sometimes these Metal Gear Solid games, they teach you about life and all in some ways. And this one, with just a lot of the what's it called, like techno jargon or whatever that it has in it, it's done in a way that it feels very believable. And some of it is true, some of it is fiction, but it's just all done in a way and all that just feels very believable and all. And so because of that, you learn a little thing about nuclear weapons and, you know, the START treaty and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, Metal Gear Solid, just an amazing game. And again, for being someone that is lured to these kind of games that has adventure elements with good storytelling and all that, you know, this is why I place this one fairly high on my list.
The last Metroid is in captivity. The galaxy is at peace.
Coming in at number 12 is Super Metroid. This game came out originally on the Super Nintendo back in 1994. It was one of the very cool games that came out during 1994, which I believe is also one of the greatest years in gaming in my opinion. And this game, I actually played it around the time that it came out. My brother and I, so we had a friend that he brought over his Super Nintendo, and we convinced him to rent this game, as we were just seeing a lot of good reviews on it. With mainly, we were going off of the reviews off of Game Info or Game Fan back in the day, and so it was getting a lot of good reviews. And also, we're like, we got to check this game out, see what it's all about. And as I said with Metroid Zero Mission, I was a fan of the first Metroid game. It's just that it seemed a little difficult and all that, and something about it that just seemed a little bit hard to get into. But I just loved the overall concept of had something like a setting that was somewhat similar to like the movie Aliens, which I was a big fan of, and the Metroidvania style that we know as it now. But back then we didn't quite know it like that. But basically where you have level layouts which they all sort of interconnect with each other, and where you can get certain power-ups that opens up more of the map. It's just a very addicting gameplay style and all. And this is probably one of the first major games that really, really perfected that style there. Hence the term Metroidvania, which, it's the first part of that, name of that, I guess, self-titled genre. And what I liked about for me, the three flagship Nintendo series are Super Mario Brothers, The Legend of Zelda, and Metroid. And what I love about the three too also is that they, obviously their main characters are very iconic, but also is their main villain. So, excuse me, Super Mario Brothers, you have Bowser. For Legend of Zelda, you have Ganon. And then for Metroid, you have Ridley here. Which, I mean, you can also say Mother Brain and all, but I feel like Ridley has been more of a ongoing presence in the Metroid world, right? And back then we thought that was like the coolest thing ever was Mode 7. Dead bodies in a Nintendo game. And they allowed that back then? One of the great things about this game here and all is the platforming and all, just the way she controls. How I do like the more faster paced style that Samus controls in like Zero Mission and all, but something about this one too also that I feel like it lends itself really well with the level design, where she's a little bit more slower paced. Her jump kind of floats a little bit more in the air. And thus concludes one of the coolest little intros in video game. I just love that setup to it there. I think it's very, very cool, and starts off very fast paced and all to eventually slow down, and only give you a much more methodical sort of game. But I just love the way it opens up though. And especially with Ridley and all that, right? Where you just have the feeling that he's going to be a threat later. And what I love about these, Metroidvania kind of games is I just love the way these levels interconnect with each other and all. And it just makes me really appreciate like video game design, where it's almost like one big puzzle. And when I first played the first Metroid game back on the Nintendo and heard about it and all, and I kind of understood what the game was and all, I used to draw out levels like on paper, try to imagine my own, levels in my head. And just because I was just really inspired by how everything interconnects with each other. I just thought it was genius that, someone can think of it almost like a maze that comes together somehow. And so when you find a certain connection between the levels, or you find that item that opens up this area, it's just this very rewarding gameplay style that keeps me coming back for more, right? And the ones that do it right are just very addicting. And there really isn't a whole much better example of that than Super Metroid. Definitely one of the best games of this style here was, you know, the OG one, right? Because again, Metroid was cool and all, but it had a lot of issues. That this is the one where I really felt right, where they got a good handle of what it's all about, and that earned its name in the Metroidvania name. And I thought this was kind of cool how you go back to the area in the first game, if you recall this. And the graphics weren't anything too special, but they're definitely well done. And I love the way how Samus is animated. But a lot of the, you know, little graphic elements and all that I thought were pretty cool, and definitely sets the mood right for the kind of game that it is. Definitely you can tell, right, and all that the game was inspired by like the Alien movies. I believe the name Ridley comes from Ridley Scott, who was the director of the first Alien movies. I think I saw that somewhere. So you could tell, right, and all that they were definitely influenced by that. So this is, you know, this is all me, right? What I'm all about, like, you know, 80s, you know, things that are inspired from 80s movies and all that. I mean, you're winning some points with me and all if you have some kind of influence from that, and you know, especially if it's well done. But yeah, just definitely one of the best games on the Super Nintendo. It's Metroid games usually are quality titles. They're really well built. They don't really, they respect your time, they respect your intelligence, and always gives you the feeling that, you know, you're in for a challenge, but you will figure it out. You're just going to have to keep at it. And again, it is so rewarding when you finally get through a segment and all, or find that item, right, and all that you were missing. And you really get to know these levels and appreciate just everything that they're doing in the game when the level layout is so ingenious like the way it is in this one. Oh, now we got the space pirates. And another thing that I really like about this is, again, that it doesn't give you a whole lot of story. You know, you're just sort of in here, you make up the story kind of in your mind as you go. And that's one thing that I've always liked about the Metroid games. It's just a very subtle storytelling in them, because it creates a sort of dark, moody atmosphere to the games and all that I really like. And Samus, you know, I mean, she's definitely probably the most badass female video game character out there. She's just awesome. Because by this time we knew that she was a female, right? Because for those of us that knew of part 1 and the ending of that, you know, now we go into this game with the knowledge, right, that and all that you are playing a female character, a female bounty hunter. But yeah, definitely Super Metroid, one of the best in the genre. It's one of the OGs of this kind of game. And so many games were inspired by this one here that's another reason why it's on my list here, not just because of the importance of it too. I mean, how many games weren't inspired by this? So many of them. You know, a lot of great games nowadays, like Hollow Knight or Ori and the Blind Forest, and you know, Guacamelee, you know, a lot of like indie games that are developed nowadays tend to be like Metroidvania games and all. It's just because they're you know, they were so inspired by this game here. But yeah, Super Metroid, one of the all-time greatest. Coming in at number 11 is Red Dead Redemption. Red Dead Redemption came out, I believe, in 2010, and it came out on the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360. No, it didn't come out on the PC because I remember there was a big deal about it not coming out on PC until recently. And it came out to a lot of praise. People really loved this game as an alternative to Grand Theft Auto, but not just the Grand Theft Auto in the West. It really had an identity of its own and ended up becoming one of the most beloved open world games out there. Now, I've already shown part 2 and talked in great lengths about that one there. Well, maybe not great lengths, but I talked about that one there already. And so much of that game, I mean, obviously the game mechanics of that one, the graphics and all that are, better than this one here. But I still come back to this one as being my more favorite Red Dead Redemption game. And again, a lot of it just has to do with I just appreciate the story more of this and all, and a lot of the overall atmosphere of this game and all. And the whole revenge plot of this one is just classic Western stuff and all. And, for some of those reasons there is just why I just prefer this one over it. Sometimes it's just the feel of a game and all, that you just end up preferring over another one, even if it's mechanically not as good and all. But this one still plays very good. It's, the mission structure of this game is, there's a lot of varied missions you can do, a lot of fun things and all that you would want to do and all you would think you would do, like in the, in the Wild West. And the story, the acting is very top notch in this. One of the best stories in video games too, just alongside with Red Dead Redemption 2. Both of them just very well done stories. And like I've said before several times already with open world games, is the world you're bringing me into, is it believable? Is this something that can hold the illusion, right? And all that I'm in this different time period or world or whatever. And this one absolutely nails the Western vibe, just like part 2 did, and this one still, it really gives you that feeling there, like here where I'm at, really gives you the feeling that you're in this dusty old Western little village here. And a lot of the things that you see, again, I don't know how authentic everything is, but it certainly feels like it, just like with her there stirring that pot there, just their wardrobe, the tools that you see being used, so many little details. And this is one area where Rockstar is really good at, especially once we started getting into the more powerful systems, that so much detail in these games that really flesh out these worlds and make them very believable. And a lot of the weapons that you use, right, and all, they're going to be very, they feel very authentic, right, and all to what was available at the time. Excuse me. And another thing too also that I really liked, which was, I feel like kind of crucial to get in a Western game, is when you're riding a horse, how it controls, the feel of them and all that, I thought was really well done. And yeah, the graphics for the time were pretty well done. The version I'm playing here is on the Switch, which it's a pretty decent port. As far as I can see, it's very comparable to the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 versions, if not better.
Figured it's about time I started paying back that $15.
I sure can use an extra pair of hands around here. Let's see if we can get you back in the saddle.
John Marston in this version in this game here, definitely amongst the higher end, right, of my favorite video game protagonists. He's just so well written. His overall story arc and all is just really great, and you can really understand his plight of why he's doing what he's got to do. And ultimately it just comes down to where he's just trying to do right by his family and all. And it's very classic Western, but it's done, it has, just a new fresh takes on it though and all. And I think that's what's cool about it, is that it does a good job of combining kind of with new story sort of sensibilities, storytelling sensibilities, and still keeping it old school though. The animation on the horses and all is really well done. And the music too also, it's very subtle. It's, because I always thought, like, how are they going to do the music in a game like this? Because we're so used to Grand Theft Auto where you can select your own music and all, off of radio stations and whatnot. But obviously this is a different time period. but just the soundtrack that it plays and all, it just goes very well with the game and very, very atmospheric and really brings you into the mood of this Wild West world.
What do you think?
I'm no expert, but it certainly looks like a fine corral.
The actor that plays John Marston, he's just a perfect fit for the character. He's great. But yeah, I got this game, and one reason that I really got into it, I feel, is that so I got it in 2010 when it came out, and at that time, I had been fairly recently moved over here to where I'm currently living at, but basically I was new in town, didn't know anybody really, and so I had gotten a job and I was working and all, but this game here just sort of helped me feel like I was coming into my own, and all, meeting fresh new faces, because that's kind of what the game's all about too also.
Let's go.
And so yeah, it just sort of helped set my mind at ease and all on some kind of lonely nights and all, right, where I was just there by myself at the apartment that I was living at and all, and just helped me live through this adventure here and get my mind off of things, and as I was getting settled in here. And it also kind of reminds me too of an old favorite of mine going way back to the Oregon Trail. It kind of felt like a much modern version of that, right? And you're hunting, you're in the Wild West and all, and so for some reason it just gave me memories of playing, back in the day when I used to play Oregon Trail. Which actually, why didn't I add that game on the list? Huh. But anyways. Yeah, so many cool characters that you meet in this, and again, they're all really well acted. Oh, get back on my horse. Oops. Oh, gosh. For the most part, it controls pretty well. But yeah, it's something about the color tone and all that it just does such a good job, right? And not to make you feel like you're in this environment here. Like you can almost feel the heat, of the weather in this game.
How about a cold drink, Mr. Marston?
Thank you, ma'am. Getting shot and riding a horse seems to take it out of you. I can use a rest.
Sure. Come on in. I'll show you the house and then you can sit for a while.
Thank you.
Mr. Marston,
Miss McFarland.
remember me telling you about the trouble we've been having with rustlers and other undesirables?
I do?
Will you help me keep watch on the property line this evening?
Sure.
I want to see just who is trespassing on our land.
This is a fine weapon.
Come, let's head out. The country is really beautiful at around this time. Come on, then. Let's mount up and take a look.
There were certain moments in this game too also, and I'll just say that the way they utilize certain songs and what's happening, and then where you're at in the plot of the game and all, that was, I just thought it was really clever, really well written, very cinematic, dramatic. Just some of my more favorite moments in video games history. It just gave you a sense of like you are out on your own, right? And all trying to do your duty here of what you were, ultimately with what the plot is telling you to do in the game. And that you are not a perfect man by no means, but you're on a mission to still fulfill your duty, to still, do right by your family and all. And, again, to say any more and I would be kind of spoiling it. But I just felt there were two very powerful scenes in this game here that really stood out to me. And I always like listening to the songs, particular song choices that they use, that I just felt that it really heightened the emotion of this game here. But yeah, Red Dead Redemption, if for some reason you haven't played it, it's available on most modern systems now, and you absolutely owe it to yourself to check this game out.